So this will be the last video on this essay. I'm not going to require you to read the last section of the essay, section 4. I don't really think it's a little bit too much, and I think the most crucial material is presented in the first 3 sections, especially section 3. What I'm going to concentrate here on is what is said in section 3, mostly about the crucial distinction between a desire and a wish. And this has to do with his distinction between grieving over something and feeling sorry about something. What is the difference? He says here, and this is, on the middle of page 467, he says, therefore, on the assumption that grief and sorrow, again, grieving over something, as opposed to feeling sorry about something. Therefore, on the assumption that grief and sorrow are genuinely different emotions, and in light of the fact that nominal differences, common objects, and possible common causes and consequences are all non-differentiating, meaning someone could grieve over an event while someone could simply feel sorrow or be sorry over an event. They could be the same event, and in both cases, it could be an appropriate response. What is it that actually differentiates sorrowing, feeling sorry, and grieving? It seems that the differences between these emotions can only be traced to differences in their ingredient conative elements. And again, that means the desiring element or the wanting element would be better, because what he wants to say is that, or what he will say is that when we grieve, we feel a desire. And that desire is that not P, right? That someone who has died not be dead. Whereas when we feel sorry about, let's say, someone's death, we don't necessarily, we simply wish that they still be alive. But this is a big difference between desiring something and wishing for something. That in sorrow, we wish that something hadn't occurred. In desiring, we actively want that not to be true. And that, again, a big difference between wishing and sorrowing is, between desiring and wishing, is that when we desire something to be true, we are prompted to do something about it. Whereas a wish is like an idle wish, you might say, or a wish is idle. We can wish for things and still wish that they be true, but not feel any compulsion to actually do something to make it true. And this is what really differentiates the state of grieving from the state of being sorry or sorrowing. As he says here at the bottom of the page, unlike grief, as pictured in theory G, sorrow's conative, let's say its wanting component, is not desire or desiring in the full sense required for genuine grief. Rather, is the counterpart of desiring, which is sorrow's conative, wanting component. The counterpart of desiring, which lacks the typical belief-consistent rationality requirement, is, of course, wishing. Now, the belief-consistent rationality requirement, I'm getting a little technical here, but what he's saying is that if you know that P is true and you have a desire that not P, you're being irrational. There is a rationality requirement. However, if you know that P is true and you merely wish that it not be true, you are not in an irrational state, because what we wish for is not under the same rationality constraints as what we desire. So he continues saying, consequently, if, say, T is sorry about or over what S grieves, for example, the death of N, then while S has the belief-contrary desire that N did not die, T has the wish that N not have died. A wish that an event not have occurred is not under the constraint of rationality, that one wish only for what one supposes is possible, whereas desire would be. That is, unless we are desiring something that we believe to be possible, we are being irrational, not true of wishing. It is not, therefore, under the belief consistency requirement. In short, a person can wish for anything, possible or impossible, past as well as future events. This is because the logically appropriate objects of wishing is a wider category of situations or events than the appropriate objects of desire. So let's start to apply this to death. Um, if someone close to me dies, I know that they're dead. I know that they've died. That's the belief component. I feel sadness. That's the feeling component. I feel a desire that they not have died. That's the conative or wanting component. I am in an irrational state because my desire conflicts with my belief, with what I know to be true or strongly believe to be true. If someone across the world, a famous person, let's say, I don't know, if I find out that David Bowie has died, I feel bad that Bowie's died. Not like super bad, but like, wow, that's too bad. Bowie died. Um, I wish that he hadn't died, but that wish I know to be impossible on the condition of my belief that he is in fact dead. But that doesn't put me in an irrational state because I can wish for anything. But if I desire something which I know not to be true, that means it's not bad to do it, but it means I am in an irrational state because my desire conflicts with what I know to be true. Uh, why is that? Well, he says here, farther down the page, emotions generally are motivating and reason giving states or conditions. If an agent S hates someone X, loves Z, or is angered by the fact that Q, then S will be moved to do, I think that's phi, the Greek letter phi. That is, if you desire something, you will be moved to do something about it. If you merely wish for something, you're not necessarily. And that's really where the irrationality comes from, this conflict between what you know and what you desire. Because just because you know something can't happen does not mean that you stop desiring it. And this is where I find this theory of grief to be very, very powerful and explain a lot. Uh, what, as he says down here, this is on page 469, one grieves in part just in that there is nothing which can be done. This is but another way of noting that there is nothing that one can do in relation to one's desires because the desires are contrary to what one knows or believes to be the case. They are impossible desires. So I find this to be a very powerful theory of grief because it does explain what it's like to grieve and why grief is so painful and why you kind of feel like you're going crazy, I think, when you grieve. And that's because something that you know to be true, someone has died, you actively desire that it not be true. So your mind, let's say, and your heart are in two different places. And no matter how many times your mind tells your heart that its desire cannot possibly be fulfilled, the heart still wants what it wants. This is why grief does feel like a form of, it's almost like a form of illness in that there is this conflict, this inner conflict that's going on. And again, no matter how many times your mind, your rational part, tells your desiring part that it's got to knock it off, that doesn't necessarily happen. Yeah, so there's a lot more to this essay, but I think for a week, we've definitely gone far enough. I will not go through section 4, which is mostly about him anticipating objections from other philosophers and defending the theory, but I think we've pretty much got the whole thing. Now, one of the things I really want you to do when you read C.S. Lewis's memoir, A Grief Observed, in the next module, is to think about how far Gustafson's academic or philosophical definition of grief is really verified or borne out by the actual experience that C.S. Lewis relates in his memoir about grieving for his wife.